7. That's the count. The text doesn't treat it as symbolic. First, Enoch names 7 stars pulled off their stations and locked in a pit beneath the earth. And the text describes that pit the way you describe a building: dimensions, conditions, duration of sentence. I've read the passage in 3 translations, and none of them soften it. They just disagree on whether to call the inmates stars or angels, and that disagreement is half the reason I made this video. I'm Daniel Voss. This is the Black Parchment. I came to chapters 18 through 21 with one question that seemed small and turned out not to be. Does this text treat stars as scenery, or does it treat them as staff? The answer split the question open, because Enoch doesn't just describe stars that operate on schedules and get punished for missing them. It describes one that left the sky and walked on the ground. Before I go further, if you're interested in having your own personal readings based on Enochic tradition, I've put it on my website theblackstore.co. Link is in the description, or scan this QR code on screen. I'm going to argue a position in this video, and I want to state it up front so you know exactly what you're evaluating. I think first Enoch treats stars as a workforce: assigned posts, fixed schedules, named supervisors, and a detention protocol for the ones who stopped showing up. I'll walk through 7 things the text says, that point there. You decide whether the reading holds, but I'll tell you now, 6 of them are strange, and one of them is the reason I can't put this down. 1. Stars have shifts. Chapter 18, verse 15. Uriel is walking Enoch through a place at the edge of heaven and earth, and he points to 7 stars. H. Charles published the English in 1912, and his translation says they transgressed the commandment of the Lord because they did not come forth at their appointed times. Knibb at Oxford kept it almost word for word in 1978. Isaac in 1983 didn't change it either. 3 translators spread across 70 years, and all 3 of them land on the same structure: appointed times. That's a schedule. Back up from the punishment for a second and sit with the assumption underneath it. Stars have appointed times. They are supposed to appear. They are expected somewhere at a specific moment, and when they don't show, it counts as a violation. The text doesn't argue for this. It doesn't explain it. It just assumes you already know that stars have schedules, the same way a shift report assumes you know what a shift is. I've read Psalms my whole life. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the stars sing praise. That's worship. This isn't worship. This reads like a disciplinary file, and I mean that literally, not as a metaphor for how intense it feels. The structure of the passage is the structure of a write-up. Violation, evidence, consequence. 2. Stars can refuse. Same verses. If stars have appointed times and these 7 didn't come forth, the text is telling you they could have. You don't discipline a rock for falling. Transgression means choice. Charles uses the word transgressed. Isaac keeps it. The Ge'ez doesn't soften it. This is the language you'd use for a soldier who walked away from a post, not a lamp that burned out. Something on this list doesn't belong with the others. I don't mean it contradicts them. I mean it operates at a different scale, and when I got to it, it reorganized every item before it. I'm not there yet. If you've read 1st Enoch and hit a single line that made you stop and go back to it, I want to know which one. I read the comments on this channel. I use them. 3. Stars are inventoried. The astronomical book runs from chapter 72 to chapter 82, and most readers skip it because it reads like a spreadsheet. 12 gates in the east, 12 in the west. Luminaries assigned to each gate. a full year mapped in 364 days, broken into 4 quarters of exactly 91 days, each quarter containing exactly 13 weeks. The numbers are clean, not approximately clean. They balance to the digit. Otto Neugebauer analyzed this section. He was a historian of ancient mathematics, not a theologian, and he didn't treat the astronomical book as theology. He treated it as a technical document because it functions as one. His work on Ethiopic astronomical texts, published through the Austrian Academy of Sciences in 1979, showed that the arithmetic is precise. The gate assignment cycle without remainder. The daily counts per month produce correct quarterly totals. The quarters produce the correct annual total. You don't get balanced modular arithmetic in a dream sequence. Here's how the system actually works, because this matters for everything after it. The year has 364 days, 4 quarters of 91 days each, 12 months, alternating 30 and 31 days in a fixed pattern. The sun moves through 6 eastern gates and 6 western gates over the course of a year. Gate 1 is the winter solstice. Gate 6 is the summer solstice. Each gate has a set number of days the sun spends in it before moving to the next, and those counts are specified in the text. When VanderKam at Notre Dame worked through this material, he pointed out that the astronomical book doesn't treat luminaries as objects to admire. It treats them as operators in a system. Each one has a role. Each role has a timing. The system produces the calendar, and the calendar governed everything from agriculture to festivals. The Qumran community adopted this calendar as their actual year. They scheduled their lives around it. As infrastructure, the way you'd schedule around a factory shift calendar. The reading room at the Bodleian, where the earliest complete Ge'ez manuscript of 1st Enoch sits, costs nothing to visit, but you need to request the material 3 weeks in advance. The astronomical book, for all its precision, lived for centuries in a single textual tradition, Ethiopic, and most scholars worked from the same handful of manuscripts Bruce carried back to Oxford in 1773. The Qumran Aramaic fragments confirmed the antiquity, but they're damaged. Whole columns are missing. The arithmetic still balances from what survives. That's either luck or design, and I don't think it's luck. There's a second number buried in the astronomical book that I didn't notice for weeks. It'll show up at item 6, and it's the part I want challenged. The stars in this section aren't described the way you describe something you're looking at. They're catalogued the way you catalogue something you're managing. Entry after entry. Gate, luminary, day count, season. Like a roster somebody expected to be read by someone who needed to run the system, not admire it. 4. Stars have supervisors. Chapter 82, verses 10 through 20. Charles translates the figures assigned to stellar periods as leaders of the stars. Knibb calls them heads. Either word means the same thing. Each period of the year has a named figure responsible for the stars that operate within it, not observing them, running them. The relationship is administrative. This is where, if you've been reading Enoch as poetry, the poem starts to feel wrong. Poetry doesn't need middle management. A system does. And the text doesn't explain why stars have operators any more than a company org chart explains why departments have directors. It's assumed. It's structural. The reader is supposed to know. The passage I haven't read to you yet is in chapter 86. It's 4 verses long, and it rewired how I read everything before it. Now I owe you the strongest objection to everything I've said so far. And it's a real one. Stars and angels are swapped freely in ancient Near Eastern literature. Daniel 8 does it. Revelation does it. The identification is standard in Second Temple Jewish writing. So maybe all I've shown you is that first Enoch uses the same poetic convention everyone else used, and the schedules and supervisors and inventories are just the furniture that convention comes decorated with. I can't throw that out. The metaphor reading is held by serious people. George Nickelsburg, whose 2-volume commentary on First Enoch is the standard reference in the field, works within that framework for most of the Book of the Watchers. If you read his treatment of chapters 18 through 21 in the Hermeneia series, published in 2001, the stars are angelic beings and the binding is angelic punishment, clean and widely accepted. I'm splitting from it, and I want to mark exactly where. Because if you're going to disagree with me, I want you disagreeing with the right sentence. This is me, not the text making this argument. I'm making it. The metaphor reading accounts for the language. It doesn't account for the math. You don't need balanced arithmetic to write a metaphor. You don't need 4 quarters of 91 days that sum to 364 without a leftover to say angels are like stars. You especially don't need a calendar precise enough that a real community, the Qumran sect, adopted it as their actual operating calendar, the one they use to schedule their year. When the people at Qumran took the 364-day system from the astronomical book, they weren't borrowing a metaphor, they were installing a system. And a system that runs on stars as components doesn't square with stars as decorative language. That's the read I'm defending. If it breaks, tell me where it breaks, because I've been trying to break it for 2 months, and I can't get it to fall over. Up to now, this has been a question about how to read an old book. It stops being that at item 7. What are you taught about Enoch where you're from? Whether your church covers it, warns against it, or pretends it doesn't exist. I want the real version, not the polite one. Everything up to here is the part where the metaphor reading still has room. What comes next is where I think it runs out of air. 5. Stars are detained, not destroyed. Chapters 18 and 21 again. The 7 transgressing stars are not burned. They're not dissolved. They're taken to a specific place and held. Chapter 21, verses 3 through 6. Enoch describes a place with no heaven above it and no earth below it, no water on it, no birds, a void, and in it 7 stars bound together. I keep wanting to call it a prison. It is a prison. But the text gives it qualities that a prison doesn't normally have. The absence of sky, the absence of ground, the absence of life, like the writer is describing a place defined entirely by what's been taken out of it rather than what was put in. That's a strange way to describe a punishment if the punishment is supposed to be fire and fury. It sounds more like isolation, removal from the system. The detail that won't leave me alone is the duration. 10,000 years. That's not wrath. Wrath burns something and moves on. 10,000 years is a sentence. It implies an ending. It implies review. It's what you do with personnel who violated terms, not what you do to objects that broke. There is a location and a stated reason, and there is a clock on the wall. That's a detention protocol. Charles renders verse 6 as the prison of the stars and the host of heaven. Knibb translates the same line as the prison of the angels. One keeps the ambiguity, the other resolves it, and the choice tells you which framework the translator carried in. That split alone could fill its own video, because it's not a small decision. It's a decision about what the text thinks a star is. Now, 6. The count is built. Here's the number I held back at item 3. The astronomical book tracks both the sun and the moon through the gate system. The solar year is 364 days. Milik, who published the Qumran Enoch Fragments in 1976, identified fragments 4Q208 and 4Q209 as the Aramaic source material behind the astronomical book. Those fragments preserve tables of lunar positions. The moon is tracked through a cycle that interlocks with the same 364-day frame. Two different objects, the sun and the moon, mapped onto one numerical architecture. The gates serve both. The count holds for both. Stuckenbruck at LMU Munich, whose work on the Qumran Enoch material has been ongoing for decades, has written about how the astronomical book's numerical structure isn't incidental to the theology. Or rather, it isn't incidental at all. The structure is the content. The calendar isn't a metaphor the text uses. It's the thing the text is about. I said I'd tell you what the numbers do. They lock together. The gates, the days, the quarters, the luminaries. Pull one piece, and the arithmetic collapses. You don't build a myth that way. You build a specification that way. And a specification assumes that the objects it specifies are real components, doing real work. That's still my read, not the text's explicit claim, and I want to be precise about the boundary. The text never says stars are employees. The text shows you a system in which stars behave like employees. The inference is mine. The system is the text's. If you've read Neugebauer or Stuckenbruck and I've gotten a piece of this wrong, I want to hear it. I don't care about being right. I care about the numbers being right, because the numbers are the only part of this that isn't interpretation. 7. One star came here. Chapter 86, verse 1. The Animal Apocalypse. This is the section of 1st Enoch that retells human history from Adam to the Maccabean revolt using animal codes. Israel is a flock of sheep. The patriarchs are white bulls. Egypt is wolves. Assyria is birds of prey. The codes have been stable in the scholarship since Charles decoded them in 1906, and they're internally consistent across 5 chapters. Then this: a star falls from heaven. It falls among the cattle, and it eats. It grazes alongside them. A star from the sky arrives on the ground and lives among the animals. The word every English translation I've checked uses is grazes, eating alongside, the way an animal in a herd eats. Nickelsburg, Charles, and Tiller all identify this fallen star as one of the Watchers, a being from the category the astronomical book tracks on a duty roster. Verse 3 says, more stars follow. They fall and become bulls among the cattle. They mate with the cows. That's the descent of the 200 Watchers told in animal language, and the parallels to chapter 6, where the Watchers descend to Mount Hermon, are documented in Nickelsburg's commentary verse by verse. But the first one, the single star that falls alone in verse 1, is different. It doesn't arrive as part of a group action. It comes alone, and it doesn't do anything violent. It integrates. It walks around. It eats. I haven't been able to track down whether the ge'ez verb for grazing in 86.1 carries the same root as any of the terms used for the stellar operations in the astronomical book. I don't have the ge'ez training to chase that, and I'm not going to pretend I do. What I can see in every English translation I've checked is the word itself, grazed, an animal behavior attached to a star. This is the item I said didn't fit with the others, and here's why. Items 1 through 6 describe a system: schedules, accountability, supervisors, architecture, detention. Item 7 describes what happens when a component of that system leaves, and the text doesn't describe a crash. It describes a transfer, 1 star, from the roster, the astronomical book catalogues, walks off the job and shows up here. Not as an invader, as a resident. I'm the one calling it a transfer. The text just says it fell and grazed. But if the workforce reading holds for the first 6 items, then the 7th isn't a metaphor about a rebel angel. It's the incident that proves the system is real, because real systems have incidents and metaphors don't. Nobody I have found in the published scholarship connects the astronomical book structure to the animal apocalypse's first fallen star as 2 halves of the same labor system. Nickelsburg handles them in separate volumes. VanderKam treats the astronomical book as compositionally independent from the Watcher's material. They're probably right about the composition. I don't think they're right about the implication. I think the compiler, whoever stitched First Enoch together, put a duty roster and an incident report in the same book because they belong in the same book. That's me. I spent 11 weeks getting to that sentence, and I can't back off it. I also can't prove it. What I can tell you is that the text uses the same word, star, for what rotates through the gates in chapter 72, and what falls to the ground in chapter 86. Same word, same book, different section. Draw your own line or don't. What I keep coming back to, and this is the thing that sits with me at 2 a.m. when I should be done with this, and I am not done with this, is that every piece of the system the astronomical book lays out, the gates, the operators, the schedules, the penalties, works exactly the way you'd expect a system to work if the components in it were alive and accountable and had the option to leave. The text doesn't argue that stars are alive. It just runs a system that only makes sense if they are. You can read 1 Enoch 18 tonight. It's free online. When you get to the line about 7 stars bound in a place that looks like a furnace, you won't read it the same way. You have the schedule now, the supervisors, the detention, the calendar a real community used to run their actual year. And you know there's a passage in chapter 86 where one of them didn't get detained at all. It came here and it ate grass. Before the next video, I want to know what you think the gate assignments in the astronomical book actually describe. I have my answer. I want yours first. The next video covers what those 7 stars were doing before they were bound. The astronomical book has what amounts to a job description for every gate, and nobody talks about the operational detail in it. Subscribe if you want that. Daniel Voss. I'm still pulling the thread.